Good morning, everybody. I'm Dr. James Matthew, a professor at Northwestern University in Chicago. I do medical research focusing on how to induce tolerance in transplant patients and to discover biomarkers of clinical transplant tolerance. I'm also the editor-in-chief of Immunology, the official journal of ASHI. Welcome to this webinar. We have divided this webinar into two parts. Dr. Kelly Hitchman will describe the editorial process so that you will know what happens in the background. Then Dr. Danilo Augusto will take you through the step-by-step process on how to review a manuscript. Finally, we will have a question and answer session. So please save your questions for the end. With that, I hand it over to Dr. Kelly Hitchman. Kelly?
Thank you, Dr. Matthew. Hi, everybody. I am going to share my screen here. Great. So hopefully you can see my slides. My screen looks black. I'm going to try that one more time here.
Yes, that's okay now. It's on slide sorting mode.
Huh. That's very interesting. When I put it in presentation mode, my slides disappear. So it's going to be a little cash, but what I'm going to do is leave it out of presentation mode so that I can see and you can still see, if that's okay with you. That way we can just move forward. All right, can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, yes.
Great, wonderful. So my name's Kelly Hitchman. I am an associate professor at UT San Antonio and director of the HLA laboratory in San Antonio at University Health Hospital. And I'm also an associate editor at Human Immunology. So what I'll be discussing with you today are a few background items. I'll kind of share with you the path that a manuscript takes prior to peer review, so that you can kind of get a behind the scenes peek at what happens after a manuscript is submitted. But then also talk about reviewer selection by associate editors and what it looks like to be called upon to be a reviewer and what the importance of peer review is, because it's so very important. Human Immunology, as Dr. Matthew said, is the official manuscript of the American Society of Histocompatibility and Immunogenetics, and its contents cover a very wide range of topics that include immunogenetics and histocompatibility, but also broader topics that might also touch in transplantation and other areas of genetic research. So when a manuscript is submitted, the first person that it goes to is the editor-in-chief. What we see when a manuscript is submitted is that the manuscript is assigned a Human Immunology manuscript number. And of course, we see what type of article the authors submitted this as. Was it a short communication, a research paper, a review article, for instance? The authors are asked to choose keywords that are vitally important to their manuscript. We also see the corresponding author contact information and the author block, the order of the authors that participated in the study and preparation of the manuscript. We can see just in this snapshot view the abstract. The authors will also send at their request reviewers that they would like to see handle the manuscript, and they are allowed to submit reviewers that they do not want to look at this manuscript if there's any perceived conflict of interest or bias that the authors foresee. The authors will submit a cover letter, which discloses prior submissions and publications of the work, if any, and a summary of the manuscript, and if there was any discussion about the article submitted with any of the editorial or board members of Human Immunology. And of course, the very important meat, the draft manuscript, inclusive of figures, tables, citations, and any supplements. Then, as I said, all of these materials travel first to the editor-in-chief, who is Dr. James Matthew. And Dr. Matthew does a really outstanding job of reviewing submissions for plagiarism and for similarity to other things within the publisher space or on the internet. These are actually tools that are available to the editor-in-chief and the associate editors to look at the manuscript with regard to potential plagiarism or similarity checks made available by Elsevier, by the publisher of the manuscript. Dr. Matthew will also look for overall completeness and suitability of the article for Human Immunology. And if all of these items check out, then he will move the manuscript on to an associate editor that he feels has a background most suited for the contents of the article. Something that happens very frequently, though, at this stage is desk rejection. This is when the editor-in-chief determines that the article has included plagiarism, is too similar to previously published work, or is not complete or is not suitable for the journal. Unfortunately, the majority of submissions incur desk rejection, and this has a lot to do with the current abilities of technology and bots submitting manuscripts that really aren't real. But good quality articles will continue on in the process and be assigned to an associate editor. On the right side of your screen, I have a list of the current associate editors within Human Immunology. Of course, there is also a full editorial board for Human Immunology that's not on the screen. But your associate editors are from different areas and have different specialties in research and clinical practice. And this is really important and something that Human Immunology and Dr. Matthew have taken into account to make sure that we have a lot of different types of expertise within the associate editor pool to handle a lot of diverse types of articles. So, of course, the associate editors then are using their particular skill set to review the article again, using the tools from their point of view to look for plagiarism, similarity checks, and then again, also from their purview, the overall completeness and suitability for the journal, and just asking, is this an article that our readership would want to read? Is this a type of article that will help our readership, that will help our clinical and research specialists, that they would be apt to cite in the future for their work? And if this is true, then this manuscript will then be assigned to a pool of peer reviewers. If not, the associate editor does have the option of rejecting the manuscript at this point as well. So the very important part of the process, and if you're not a peer reviewer yet, especially if you're not a peer reviewer for Human Immunology, this part could include you, and we hope it will, and we welcome your expertise. This is probably the most detailed and one of the most important parts of making sure a manuscript is suitable for the literature, this multi-peer review. So the associate editor will look through logs of reviewers and logs of authors and determine what authors they can locate that have the right type of specific expertise related to the work that was submitted. These peer reviewers are tasked with scoring the manuscript, providing confidential feedback to the editor as appropriate about their praise and concerns for the manuscript, feedback that the authors can see, both major and minor points. So very important, so that if needed, and it's usually needed, the authors can strengthen their work prior to publication. And then they are tasked with recommending to the editor their honest feedback. Is this article worthy of publication? If so, they would accept for publication. Maybe the article is very worthy, but it needs a little bit more work. And in that circumstance, maybe they would recommend minor or even major revision prior to the release of the article into the literature pool. And perhaps they think, in their opinion and from their purview and expertise, that the article is not worthy of publication. And in that instance, they can recommend to reject the article. If the article is asked to be revised, those same reviewers may be called upon again to review the edits, especially the edits specific to their recommendations, to then submit a new recommendation for future edit or future publication. So what really is peer review, and why is it not just important, it's really vital. We couldn't have sound scientific body of literature without peer review. Peer reviewers really maintain the integrity of the literature. They ensure that what is published is really novel, accurate, that the studies that are performed that put forth conclusive information are rigorous, complete, and of high quality. And above and beyond that, peer reviewers are important to journals, not just in this work that they do, but peer reviewers really are the ones that build the foundation of what journals are and what they will be to come. These peer reviewers speak to what the audience wants. Their experience, their research can tell us, does the audience want to see this article or not? And by lobbing those opinions, the peer reviewers themselves do shape the scope of a journal, the brand of a journal, the quality of the content that's eventually published in that journal. And all of this adds value, not just to the broader literature, but to the journal that they peer review for. Here on the left is an example of the scoring system that exists in human immunology, asking very important questions about the peer reviewers' feelings about a certain manuscript's novelty and quality. So why do we want you to think about being a peer reviewer? We need broad levels of expertise. All journals do. That is what propels the literature forward. And you don't have to be a know-it-all. Your particular area of expertise and your depth in that area is what's really, really important. So to peer review for a journal, you simply need to have a specialty training area or certain expertise that are related to articles that may be published in that journal. You do not have to be a fully fledged tenured faculty member to be a peer reviewer. We like to see people at any stage of their careers, as long as they have that specialty training and a high level of expertise. Even if an article, we get articles, for instance, that involve many areas of expertise in one article. We might get an article about how a very particular type of microbe impacts a very particular type of cancer and how epigenetics ties all of that together. So in that particular instance, you don't have to be an expert in all of those different things or have yourself performed those types of complex experiments, but it would look ideal if you have experience in that type of microbial research, that type of cancer research, or in epigenetics research. You just really need to be able to provide insightful and constructive and critical feedback to a particular article, at least in part. And we do value you, and we try to show peer reviewers that we value them. It's corny to say, but it's true. Peer review, racking up those reviews can be very rewarding, both literally and figuratively. It is a career boost. It's visibility for the peer reviewer. You are noted as the reviewer on a paper. You get an inside view of what it takes for a manuscript to be accepted. And you get an inside view then of what it takes for research to be good, to be novel, to be valid. And this alone can improve your research. And there's actually a really neat study, and I can't take credit for this. This was very kindly shared with me by Dr. Matthew, a study back in 2019 where they actually questioned chief editors of many different publications and asked them what makes a great peer reviewer. And they had very punctate answers. They knew what they were looking for. They're looking for people who demonstrate a high level of knowledge in a subject area. They've published in that subject area. They've presented in that subject area. They were trained and mentored in a place that specializes in that subject area. They're interested in people who show that they stay up to date with the literature. They are very well aware and display knowledge of current standards and guidelines, evolving evidence and evidence-based practice in their day-to-day professional lives. And most importantly, peer reviewers seem to have an attitude that they are duty-driven towards the scientific community and making that scientific community and the body of literature that supports it better, rather than just garnering recognition for themselves. And again, it should be overstated that very often postdocs and junior faculty are the best peer reviewers because they're nervous and they're more careful and more exacting in their feedback. They have the right balance of time and consideration and caution to make great peer reviewers, and their feedback tends to be more detailed. So how do you take the first step to become a peer reviewer? Lots of ways. Look out for announcements from journal articles, from journals. Human Immunology is always looking for new peer reviewers. We can't get enough. Ask your mentor or a colleague that you know is already involved in peer review to refer you. Network at meetings. Human Immunology will be at the 50th anniversary annual ASHI meeting in Anaheim in October. Come see us, see more about what human immunology is about, and get signed up to be a peer reviewer. Seek out service to your professional society through peer review. Again, Human Immunology is the official journal of the American Society of Histocompatibility and Immunogenetics. So if you're an ASHI member, Human Immunology is your premier journal. And then you can always just reach out on your own, send your contact information and your expression of interest to a journal. And you could certainly seek out journals that have mentorship programs for peer review. There are quite a few of those. But, you know, when given the opportunity, especially through Human Immunology, you'll see invitations come to your email inbox that look kind of like this. And it's a request. We think your area of expertise would be ideal to take a look at and give feedback on this specific article. Please say yes or no. What does it mean to get one of these? It usually means that if you accept, you're going to have about 2 weeks or maybe a little less for some journals to give your feedback. It's well worth your time if you have the time. Even if you have to decline, please do so timely so that we're not holding up feedback to the authors. And please, please, if you decline, suggest a colleague that you think would be a good fit for the article. That helps out the associate editor so very much. If you do accept, you get reviewer perks, and you're a part of making the journal content just great. And again, you might be called on to review the same article more than once if revisions were recommended. So any advice that I can give as an associate editor is register with ORCID, the Open Research and Contributor ID. Get an ORCID ID. I've put the website there for you. This is a unique profile and identifier that you can use to share your profile with professional entities. And this means you don't have to retype all of your profile for everybody over and over again. You can simply share your ORCID ID and it'll automate that process in a lot of ways for you. Use the Web of Science, link it to your ORCID profile. This will keep track of your reviews and your publications automatically. It's really great. Claim CME credits, claim continuing education credits for your reviews. This work is definitely worth continuing education. And collect review certificates. Keep your work confidential. If you are asked to review an article, it was at the request of confidentiality. You're not to share that article with colleagues outside of review, with mentors, or even with trainees outside of review without first getting permission from the journal in question. If you're a mentor and you don't have time to review, we love referrals to your trainees who might be very well suited to review, but ask us if that's okay first. And don't use artificial intelligence to perform your reviews. That would usually require you to copy and paste at least portions of the manuscript into artificial intelligence tools, and that is inappropriate. If you are tasked with whether or not to accept or decline an invitation, accept if the article does meet your area of expertise. If you feel confident that you can deliver a great review that will help the manuscript be its best, especially if you do not have a conflict of interest, and if you do have the time to dedicate to a high quality review. If any of those things are not true, then decline the invitation and suggest somebody else that you know. And with that, I thank you very much for this time, and very excited to turn it over to the really important part of this presentation about how to have a great quality review from Dr. Danilo Augusto.
Thank you, Charlie. Share my screen. Is everybody seeing my presentation?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kelly, for your great presentation. I disagree that that's the only important part. I think what you said was just fantastic and very informative. And even before I start, I will just echo that Kelly just said, that reviewing papers really does boost our career. It happened to me. I reviewed many papers before I became an editor. I met with editors that were inviting me just because of the review. So it really does boost our career. Okay, so I'm Danilo Augusto. I'm an assistant professor at UNC Charlotte. I work with human genetics, specifically immunogenetics, and I'm an associate editor for Immunology, Frontiers in Genetics, and a couple of other papers, journals. And I'm very happy to share some of the experience that I have with editing or handling many manuscripts. I think the first question that we have to address is, why did you receive an invitation to review? And Kelly already mentioned those regions, most of those reasons, and it is because you have expertise. It doesn't matter if it's expertise in some specific topic. It could be a broad expertise in the field, but it could be an expertise in some specific subject or in some specific method or some specific data analysis. And that's what the editor is asking your help. And how do we know that you have expertise? Or either sometimes you can fill a form and suggest and volunteer to be a reviewer, but most of the times we're also using publications online to see what authors have published something in that direction. And I just want to give a couple of examples why we don't need to have expertise in all the topics to be a great reviewer, as Kelly just said. So for example, if we have a paper about Mendelian randomization study in a rare disease, you don't necessarily need to know about the rare disease. Maybe you have done Mendelian randomization before and you know how it works, or maybe you are an expert in this rare disease. And if the editor invited you, and they probably invite somebody else that will complement your expertise. And that's why it is important to not be afraid to accept the invitation just because you don't know everything about the paper. And another example is this paper here that is highly cited, published in our journal in Immunology. And I remember when I was inviting reviewers for this manuscript, I tried to find somebody that would be very knowledgeable about HLA, but it is very difficult to find somebody that is knowledgeable about HLA and also protein prediction. So we invite people that have different expertise. Somebody was very, very skilled in protein analysis. Somebody else had a broader view of the field, and that became a very, very powerful team to review this manuscript. And when we are inviting a review, I think we know that as an editor, and we respect that a lot, because we know that we are asking from you as a reviewer the most important thing that you can give us, which is your time. So we really appreciate your time, your effort to have to give us your recommendations about this study. And what we're expecting from you as a reviewer is that we can give you your general criticism, your considerations, a data review from all the analysis that you know, that you're expert or have some expertise on that aspect, and also some ethical considerations if you think it's appropriate. So I will go over to some of those components now and give some examples what we expect or what we do not expect. And I hope that can help you as a reviewer to present to submit a good review. So the first thing that we suggest is that the reviewer has a first read through to the paper. So it goes to the paper, read it from the beginning to the end to see the first impressions and start writing down or thinking which are the general considerations. And that includes main question. What is the main question of this study? What is the study addressing? Or what is its relevance? Do you think that this is interesting? Do you think that this is really impacting the field? Or is it novel? Has it been done before? If it is something similar has been done before, how does this study compare to the other published studies? Is it easy to read? Can I understand what is it being presented? Or maybe it's not so easy to read, but maybe I can have some suggestions. Or also, are the conclusions consistent with the evidence presented? Sometimes the paper is great, there are great results, but the conclusions are not really matching what we are seeing in that paper. So this is also another point that the reviewer is asked to address and to think about. Other point is consistency. Are the data consistent with the text, figures, tables? And when we think about the figure tables, are they also important to this paper? Sometimes that are unnecessary figures or figures that are not really important. On the same time, there might be problems or issues or small details that are not really precise in those tables or in those figures. But this is also important to have an overview of this. And also, are the references appropriate? I think that usually we don't need to go over every reference, every point, but sometimes we can see right away that, oh, maybe this is not an appropriate reference, or there's an overall mention or citations of not appropriate references. And did you spot a major or a fatal flaw? Something that said, we cannot proceed with this. I think this is a major thing that has not been addressed, or a problem that is not possible to solve during the peer review process. After we have, as the reviewer has this first view and the first opinion about the paper, now is the time to have a second read where the reviewer goes to more details and more specific points and more specific constructive criticism. And we say constructive because the idea is that we, as a reviewer, want to help to improve this manuscript. And that's the main purpose of the peer review. And one of the questions that we can have here is, does the introduction set out the argument? It is like giving enough information for the reader to understand why this is being done, why this is relevant. It's like enough to have like for this paper to be comprehended. Does the introduction also summarize the related research, or it's lacking some more detail about the prior research? Are the relevance and novelty presented? Is it clear why this is relevant and novel? Are the aims clear? Sometimes the aims are not really, we can understand why it is being done, but it's not clear. So the aims have to be clear. And other important aspect is language. But when we think about language, one thing that we ask the reviewers is, do not fix language. If you cannot understand because the language is too poor, your recommendation can be to reject it. But at the same time, if the language is not fantastic, there are some issues there, but you can understand the main message. And in that case, it is interesting to give some recommendations or some comments, or give some specific examples where the language is not appropriate, because that will help the authors, when they get your review, to see where they need to fix. So you can point out some clarity issues, some typos, but it's not your job as a reviewer to rewrite that paper or to fix the language. And it's more an overall recommendation. In terms of methods, this is something that sometimes that reviewer was invited is specific because of expertise in that particular method. So in this specific case, we want to know if the reviewer thinks that the sample size is appropriate, if there was enough replication of the experiments, or if it's an association study, for example, there are good controls, is the data replicable, can we repeat those experiments, can we be sure that this study was conducted like properly and with right controls. And this is like where we like, as an editor, to have as more detail as possible, because nobody knows everything, and the feedback from reviewers will be very important to the editor to have a real idea of this manuscript is suitable for publication. The same thing happens for the data presentation. Is the data accurate? Are the statistical analysis and the statistical approach like appropriate for this manuscript? Is well presented? And most importantly, are the data supporting the conclusions? Can I go to the figures, the tables, see that they're consistent and they are all supporting to these conclusions? If it is, great. If it is not, why not? Is there something missing? Is something that should have been done differently? But one important thing also is, as reviewers, we should avoid asking for more experiments. And why is that? I mean, if the authors had a ability to perform those experiments, they probably would have already presented those experiments. So sometimes it's a very easy experiment, something that could be very done, but sometimes the reviewer think, oh, this is very easy, they should have done that. But sometimes it's not that easy, or sometimes it's not really necessary. Sometimes it's going to be like an experiment that will not change any conclusion in this paper. So we should avoid, as a reviewer, asking for more experiments unless they are really absolutely necessary. For figures and tables, sometimes there are issues in the tables that the editor doesn't see it, the author didn't see it. So the reviewers give a really important help to find those problems. And just an example, which is very common in immunogenetics papers, when we write, when the authors write the alleles names, and if they use Excel, for example, sometimes the allele names are changed to dates or to some other type of data, and they become completely wrong. And sometimes these are published because nobody noticed that there was like an issue with the table. So the reviews should also help us or help the journal, the editor, to see those minimal but important issues. In terms of the ethical considerations, those ethical considerations, whenever the reviewers think that it's something that should be talked about, they should write directly to the editor, confidentially to the editor. For example, I suspect that there's some plagiarism here. And sometimes it's not like, oh, the authors copied somebody else's work, but sometimes it's self-plagiarism. Sometimes the authors are publishing so many papers on that topic that they even notice that some of the parts of these papers are very similar to their previous publications. Or maybe you might suspect that this is like fake data, or maybe something is really off here that brings like a red flag about the data fabrication. You can send your comment directly and confidentially to the editor. Sometimes also you might find that the authors are using too many self-citations instead of citing papers that actually should have been cited, the original information for that topics. You can also put your considerations about that. And another aspect that is more and more common is the salami slicing. So this is when we have like the author has a nice story, sometimes a nice paper, but because of the pressure of like having multiple papers, sometimes this paper is divided in like 3 or 4 publications that are very similar and very complementary to each other. And this is also something that we do not want to have in our journal, or the editors want to avoid it. So that's also, if you suspect that this is happening, you can write a comment to the editor. The editor will check, will also have a decision considering all your opinions. And I think another important aspect of the peer review is that the reviewer should be aware of their own biases. And when I say this, I think it's important to make it clear that everybody has biases. If we are humans, we have bias. And we should be aware of those biases and try to exclude them from our review, from our opinion in this paper. So, for example, what usually can cause some bias in the review is like the nationality of the authors, the countries or where this research was developed, sometimes the affiliations, or it's an Ivy League institution, it's a super famous university. Of course, this paper is good. Not necessarily. Sometimes everybody makes mistakes. So the affiliation or this should not impact the quality of your review, the detail of your data. When you go to the data, it should be the same rigor to everybody, regardless where these papers are coming from, or avoid those unnecessary biases. I also want to give some examples of what not to do when we are reviewing a paper. One thing that is we ask the reviewers not to do is to write like a one-sentence review, something like, wow, this paper is fantastic and should be accepted. This is not informative or helpful at all to the editor. We don't know why this paper is great or why the reviewer thinks this paper is great. And this does not help peer review process. And we ask that the reviewer give us more information why they think this paper is suitable or not suitable for publication. As more detail, the better. And also, sometimes we receive comments like, oh, these results are great, but I suggest you reject it because this manuscript is more suited to whatever journal. If you received an invitation to review a paper from a specific journal, the editor already checked the suitability of that paper for the journal. So as a reviewer, we should be concerned about the science that's being presented, the clarity, the originality, all those topics that we mentioned, not the suitability for this specific journal. This is the editor's job. Other example, what not to do. And this happened to me and was like a very sensitive situation. So one of the reviewers commented, oh, I think the English language of this manuscript could be improved. Perhaps checked by a native speaker could be beneficial. But just to give some context here, the first and the last authors had Asian last names, and they replied, the first and the corresponding authors were born in the USA. English is our native and sole language. In over 150 publications, this is the first instance where this issue has been brought to our attention. And when I checked the manuscript again, language was great. There was no major issues at all. And this is one of the topics that we said we should avoid our biases. And those authors were very offended with that comment. And we should avoid this in the peer review process. Other example of what not to do. Oh, this manuscript is incredibly well written. I wonder if the authors use ChatGPT. And this was a review paper written by 2 Indian women. So this was also a situation that the authors were very offended by this comment. So please do avoid those type of comments. Refer to the science. If it's incredibly well written, great, this is fantastic. There are, in Immunology, there are some questions that we expect the reviewer to answer about their opinion, and there's like if the information is well presented, the conclusions. So we ask that reviewers go really careful on those questions. They're really important because they're in a more objective way for the reviewer to have an overall idea of the suitability of those papers. So be careful with those questions because they are important. Although they're very simple, it's just check what you think, but together they are kind of very informative for the editor. And then after you did all your first read through, then your second and more detailed read, and then you have your recommendations, why, details, then you can actually write to the editor what your recommendation is. For example, okay, this is great, I don't have any problems with this, I think this is suitable for publication, so you can recommend an acceptance. Or you can recommend that this goes back to the reviewer, to the authors, for a minor or a major review, or you think that this can be rejected. But always remember that this is your recommendation to the editor. The editor will have more recommendations from different perspectives, from different reviewers, and sometimes the editor decision might not necessarily be to reject because the reviewer one asked to reject. So it is all the context that will help the editor to reach the best decision, and more important, the most fair decision in that manuscript. So be rigorous, but be very fair. That's what we ask from the reviewer. And with that, I will thank you. And I think we're going to have some questions, and I'm happy to be here.
Now you're welcome to ask your questions. You could put it in the chat or ask directly to us. Previously, I saw that there was a question about getting CME credit. And I think Kathy has already answered that question. You can get the credit from Elsevier itself, or actually Kelly had few other suggestions too. Pablo, want to answer the question, Kelly?
For how to get reviewer credits?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you log into and create an account, my favorite way is the Web of Science's Publon, because it'll automatically send you that information. And so I highly recommend that. It helps you keep track of your reviews and your publications. It's really, really, really nice. But outside of that, I review for a lot of different journals. Usually at the end of the year, I get an email summarizing my activity from almost every journal. Some give more frequent emails, but you'll generally, at the very least, get an email for the journal that you're reviewing for, thanking you for reviewing this article or these articles.
Any other questions?
I see a really great question in the chat, and this is probably for Danilo. Where do you draw the line between classifying your feedback as major versus minor revisions?
Yeah, this is a great question. For me, a minor revision is in that situation that are for example, some inaccurate sentences or something that can be changed in some of the figures or in the tables, or any change that does not really affect the major conclusions of the paper, or has to be a major rewriting of some parts of the paper. That would be a minor revision. But on the other hand, if your suggestion requires new analysis or it might change the way that we interpreting the data, it's more than a minor revision. So minor revision is, this paper is almost ready for acceptance, except for a few details, a few minor things that can be addressed before publications. More than that is already like a major revision.
Kathy and Kelly might need some help because I can't see the question, the chat. So please, I don't see the chats.
I don't see any further questions in the chat at this time.
Well, maybe I could ask a few questions myself. For example, how long do you have to review a paper? When do you have to submit your revision or recommendation review? Kelly or Danilo?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
From my purview, I review for a lot of different journals. All of them are a little bit different, but for most, it's 10 to 14 days. For human immunology, it's 14 days. And I can say I really appreciate that as a reviewer, because all of us are really, really busy and you want to do a good job and you don't want to feel rushed in giving feedback. But I would say most journals, it's between 10 and 14 days.
And just also mentioning that, yes, it's great that we have a week or two sometimes, but sometimes the manuscripts takes way longer than we anticipated. So if we left to review in your 13th day, there might be a problem because, the paper is way more complex than I thought. So do not live until the last minute to start your review.
So important. And I should throw in there too, if things happen, right? We're all human. We all have lives. Things happen. So if something does happen, and it shouldn't be like what Danilo just described, but if something legitimately happens and you cannot finish your review, most journals are very kind in allowing for short extensions to finalize your review if it's a really valid reason to do so.
For human immunology, if you let us know, then we can even extend the review time online. And also, it will be very helpful to us so that we don't get any. We can wait for you and get a very good review from you.
So there's a question in the chat asking if if individuals can get feedback or mentoring as new reviewers. I would say this can happen in a few ways. The way that I began review and got mentoring and feedback in review was by having a mentor ask the journal. A mentor of mine was asked to review an article for a journal, and the mentor asked the journal if I would be allowed to review the paper with them. And that helped me a lot get my toes wet. So you can do that through mentorship, but there are journals also that have peer review mentorship programs. So either of those two ways are good ways to get acquainted. And James, I don't know if that individual is asking specifically about human immunology. Does human immunology have a peer review mentorship program?
We don't have a formal mentorship program yet. We may develop it in the future. But there is another way. After the review is done, the editor or associate editor will send you the feedback, the review from all the other reviewers. Please go through those reviews. That will teach you a lot about your own review. So that's another way.
Yeah, and one thing that happened to me at least a couple of times, I was the reviewers reached out to me after the submitted review, and they specifically asked for feedback. And yes, sometimes we're busy, sometimes it's difficult, but sometimes it's the feedback that you can quickly, this is a great review because of this or this, or it could be improved. So you can also reach out to the editor and ask for feedback.
One thing that I would add that kind of goes along these lines that's really, really important is even if you're learning and you're nervous, fight the urge to say nothing. Don't give a review that says, this is what the paper was about. And that's it. We get that on occasion. And if you're an expert in this area, you will find something to say. Maybe it doesn't mean that you feel like the manuscript has to have revision, but give some feedback. Saying nothing is somewhat questionable.
One other thing that you should not do is provide recommendation to accept, revise, or reject the manuscript to the portion of the information to the authors. That is the purview of the editor. Please do not add a recommendation in the section to the authors, because that will put the editor in a bind. So please don't do that. One question which maybe is important is, do you recommend declining a review of a manuscript when the authors are your colleagues? Yes, please do so. Please decline, because that will be a conflict of interest, and that can create problems for yourself, the journal, and others too.
I think I can also, we have a couple of minutes, I mentioned some things that I also think is not to do. Sometimes, as a reviewer, there's some reviewers feel that they have the power to ask anything what they want to the authors because they're reviewing the paper. And sometimes we see reviewers asking to the authors to cite the reviewers' papers. This is something also that we should avoid. Sometimes the reviewer said, "Oh, this paper is not being cited," and it's like reviewers' papers that he's asking or they are asking to be cited. So we should avoid that. This is also conflict of interest, and sometimes, yes, it has to as a paper that should have been cited, but as a reviewer should avoid that type of situation.
Yeah, again, that will also give away, to some extent, give away your identity as a reviewer. So that would be, the authors will know to some extent that you may be the reviewer.
Yeah.
One other thing is important one is once you give a review and the authors reply to the reviews and make all the correction changes, and the second time, please do not ask for a separate or different modification, because the authors have already done it and it is not right that the authors are asked again. But of course, if it is a very essential one and that you forgot to ask that question, please do so. But normally, please do not ask for a revision or an area of revision that you had not asked in the first place. So that wouldn't be any help to the authors or even to the journal.
Thank you. Really great presentation. So we don't have any other more questions coming in. Wrap up the call.
Yes.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.